Like what you're hearing? Follow us on social media. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/Wrestling Epicenter, or just search Wrestling Epicenter in the search box on Facebook. On Twitter at W Epicenter. On YouTube at IWR Interactive. And of course, check us out at WrestlingEpicenter.com, your hub and home of all things professional wrestling interviews. We're the originals, and we love what we do.
All right. That beautiful bean footage. With that, take it away, Virtual James and Virtual Benya.
Welcome back to the Wrestling Epicenter on the Blaze 1260 AM, as we are now being joined by Cowboy Bill Watts. Mr. Watts, it's great to have you on the program.
Well, thank you.
It's good to have you here. So, one of the things that I've noticed about many of the guests that we've interviewed who have discussed you have said basically either they love you or they completely hate you. Why do you feel that is?
Well, I think it's because I've had an effect on life. You know, whatever I've done very passionately. And I think anytime that you're a person that's out front making decisions and leading the way, you're sort of going to have your followers and you're going to have your detractors. So, you know, that to me, I would say it would be a lot worse to go through life where nobody had an opinion about you, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
You know, being a never was been.
Right. Well, you have people, like I said, who say the nicest things about you, and some say they're not so nice. One of the ones that we had on who is kind of associated with the site is Lanny Poffo, who describes you as the halo to Ole Anderson's horns.
Well, Lanny Poffo would always have a way of putting something that would be different. I would say that for sure.
Well, what did you think of working with Lanny and, of course, his brother Randy?
I enjoyed working with Lanny. I worked actually with Lanny more than Randy. Randy, I worked with when he was playing pro baseball, and they forbid him to wrestle, so we had him wrestling under a mask, so they couldn't tell who he was. And so I really enjoyed that. And then the next time I saw him, he was in Atlanta, but then he juiced up and was big on steroids, but he was quite a bump taker. Then he had a situation happen where he got out of control, and it was where he was just about out of the business. And he called me and asked me, he said, you know, Billy said, I'm really going down the tube with what I've got, and I can't even, you know, I'm just barely surviving in the business, you know, what's wrong? And so, you know, when they see, that's what I mean, he at least sought out something and was willing to take the medicine of what he asked to find out. And so I told him, I said, well, you know, you can't do business the way you are. You can't go around threatening people with guns and pistol whipping people and all these things that you're doing. It's just not going to work. It's crazy, and you're going to be outside the mainstream, and what you've got's not working. It's not going down, and so, you know, that's where it is. So bottom line, he listened, and we talked, and I fixed him up and got his problem solved, where he apologized to the people he was in conflict with and went back to work and did great. And to his credit, he called me after he was making all the big money with Vince, and he said, Cowboy, I just had to call you and tell you how much I appreciate what you did for me, because if you hadn't done that, I wouldn't even be in the business, I wouldn't be making this money today. So, you know, that's the kind of thing. See, a lot of people have stories on me, and they don't even know me.
Right.
And they repeat a bunch of stories and a bunch of garbage about things they don't even know.
Right.
Because, you know, there's always, you know, I'm not saying that certainly that I did everything right. There's many things I did that were not right. I had a very self-destructive streak, too, but there's a lot of things that I was able to help and influence people's lives in this business.
Well, do you prefer that people actually come to you if they do have a problem with you, or do you think it's very cowardly to just go behind your back and say all these nasty things about you?
Well, you know, first of all, the people that go behind my back and say nasty things about me, I really could care less. I mean, that's their problem. It's not my problem.
Right.
You know, I know what I've done in my life. And so, you know, it's kind of like you wonder what kind of Kool-Aid they're drinking. You know, it's just, you know, some of these guys have some ridiculous concepts, and they attribute these things to me, and half the time, sometimes I don't even know what they're talking about. So, you know, whatever they want to do, that's their problem. I don't have a problem. So I was telling somebody the other day, it's just amazing to me how, like I say, everybody's got a Bill Watts story. And generally speaking, as these guys start writing their own books, which is more about them self-aggrandizing themselves than maybe telling the truth, they have a story where they backed me down, or they called me out, or they did something dramatic that really makes them look like a stud. Now, my question to you would be, in the 25 years that I was in this business, and then all the years I was in the promotion, of course, I had in my dressing room, we didn't stop a fight. If somebody got a fight, we didn't stop it. We wanted them to get it out of their system.
Yeah.
I wonder how I conducted my business in the 25 years, running and hiding from all these guys. Gee whiz, if every guy that was supposedly out there that's had me scared to death and that I wouldn't face them or I ran away from them, I must have spent most of my time hiding. So, maybe I wasn't even in the business. I just find it just completely ridiculous how some of these people carry on, and I don't even know what their purpose is, except, again, to self-aggrandize themselves. I've never said in my book that I was the toughest guy in the business. I never said that I was the best worker. I never took that kind of credit for me. As a matter of fact, did you read my book?
I've read most of it, yes.
All right. Well, the bottom line is, I think in my book, if you look at it really straightforward, you found I laid my heart out.
Yes.
And told a lot of the mistakes I had made in life and the pain they had caused a lot of people. And I think I was very, very truthful in that book.
Right, and you were not doing what I, for lack of a better term, put down other wrestlers for doing, and that is trying to make yourself... in other words, we discussed a lot of the books. One of the ones that we have a problem with, and I don't know if you read it, is the Ric Flair book. And it seems like Flair just bashes anybody that's not currently under WWE contract.
Well, again, you've got to consider the source.
Yeah, it's just self-serving.
And again, anybody that reads my book
right.
would realize I didn't set out to write that book to self-aggrandize Bill Watts.
Right.
I had a higher purpose. I wanted to give something back in life. At this point, I'll be 67 years old May the 5th.
Oh, wow.
So at this time in my life, I thought if I can help one person to understand life a little better and where they don't make the mistakes that I made, then that would be all I would ever want from writing this book. And the feedback I'm getting already is just so humbling when people write you a letter and say, this is how this book affected me, or especially if somebody says, I went and bought a Bible the other day. I haven't read a Bible in years. Because of what you said, I went and bought a Bible. And I'm reading the Bible again. Something like that, you see, to me has tremendous value. And to me, now we're talking about the purpose of why I wrote the book.
Now, one of those guys who had called you out, and whether or not it was justified, was Jake the Snake Roberts. We spoke about him for a while.
Jake the Snake, because he's so noted for calling people out, isn't he? Jake the Snake, I don't know of anybody Jake the Snake's ever called out. I mean, first of all, Jake the Snake, I don't know if he could whip anybody. I never saw anybody I thought he could whip, and I don't know if anybody was ever afraid of Jake. So, and is Jake known for being stable, or is he known for having a real serious drug abuse problem? So would you think that Jake and his story, it might just maybe it's, again, when you're talking about Kool-Aid somebody's drinking, I think Jake could be one that would really be right there that might have a problem with reality.
Yeah. He actually
The only thing I'd say about Jake is he's aptly named. He's very aptly named. He's Jake the Snake's like, trust me. Trust me. Come on, guys. And, let me say this. If we're going to sit there and interview about everybody that's talked about...
No, we're not going to do that. Don't worry about it.
I'm not interested in your interview.
Oh, we're not going to do that.
That's not the way I want to go. If you want to talk about my book or my life or something like that, then we can proceed. But I think we've gone enough down this trail that has no return.
Actually, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your religious... you mentioned it briefly. I was kind of touched in the book about how you talk about your religion. Looking back, is the wrestling business, as Vince Russo put it, evil?
Well, why don't you make your own decision, because it doesn't make any difference what I think, it's what you think. And with me, it would be a simple matter is, let's say, would you just sit there and maybe help me by saying, give me 10 things that the wrestling business today is pro-God about.
I don't know, you got Vince McMahon sitting there telling you that he is God.
Do you believe it?
No.
Well, then what's the problem? I'm asking you what you believe. I could care less what Vince believes or anybody else. I just asked you a question. You asked me if it was evil. I didn't say it was evil.
Right.
I said it's against God. But the bottom line is, tell me 10 things about the wrestling business today that's pro-God.
Well,
Let me make it easier for you, okay? I don't want to stump you. Give me 5 things that is pro-God.
Well, there's really not many things, and unfortunately, a lot of the good lessons that we're being taught, the good versus evil, kind of has gone out the window with the advent, I should say.
Let me just ask you that. Let's take religion out of it, because I'm going to say something to you real quick. My faith is not a quote about religion. My faith is about a personal relationship with my Savior, Jesus Christ. See, I think the Bible is about a deep personal relationship. I think it's God's revelation of himself to his creation, because he desires a relationship with us. So bottom line, it's my relationship. But now let's go a different level.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. If you were a serious father and you had children that
Yes.
were of an age where they would watch professional wrestling, give me 10 positive things that you think by watching that wrestling, that they gained for life that would really help them morally or ethically.
Today or ever?
Today.
Today,
What
nothing.
we're talking about today. You asked me about today.
Today would be no. I would not let my child
That's
watch
what I
wrestling.
mean. So I think it says it all. In other words, it's gone beyond the pale, and yet it still calls itself family entertainment. And I watched Vince's interview with Bryant Gumbel or whoever he interviewed with, or Bob Costas, and Vince is a forceful talker, and he's not intimidated by these guys. But I mean, how could you sit there and buy that garbage about what he was saying that they're doing and ratings-wise and yada, 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 and still then think that what they're promoting, because let me ask you this, do they promote respect for authority?
No, absolutely
Do they
not.
promote respect for the opposite gender?
Absolutely not. No, they actually beat up women.
Are they strong about being anti-drug? Yeah, no.
Well, they have a drug policy, but let's see how well that's enforced.
Yes, they have a drug policy. Did you see the last picture of McMahon on some magazine? I'd say he's taking his own stuff, wouldn't you?
I would say so, too.
All right, so the bottom line, I think we've answered that question, that anybody can look at that sport today, and they can see that, first of all, it is definitely against God. Don't they even mock God?
Yeah.
Are they mocking God right now?
With, as Jerry Lawler said, they actually just booked God in the match.
Yeah, well, sure. Let me say one thing. Everybody will meet God one day, and they'll have to explain their life. And the difference in the way I believe is that Christ will be my advocate. I don't want to be my own advocate when I go in front of God and try to tell him what I have done or why I would deserve to be in heaven. I don't want to face that deal.
Well,
that's how I feel about it.
A lot of people point at wrestling today and say it's just so entertainment-based, but if you go back to your Mid-South and the UWF, a lot of that stuff was getting more towards the sports entertainment. Of course, not to the level or the adult nature of it is now. But do you think that you guys might have been ahead of your time?
Well, I don't know. I know that fans really seem to enjoy what we did, and they certainly still talk about it a lot. And from the point of personal pride, like I think anybody has to have a certain amount of pride in what they do, or they don't do it well. It's really gratifying to find that people still have such a deep allegiance to what we did, and that they follow it so closely. I think what we did was we created exciting television and exciting wrestling. We were in an area that wasn't very big population-wise, and I was, without a doubt, bottom line, at the very least, the third best promotion in the nation, and maybe percentage-wise, the best. So we not only ran a great wrestling operation, we also ran a responsible business operation.
But a lot of people who were in that territory say that it was one of the better places to work because the money was good and the fans seemed to actually appreciate what you guys were doing.
Well, they respected. One thing we did, as a wrestler, I can't make you change your mind about what you think about wrestling, but I can demand that you respect me. And I think that I always would ask our guys to carry themselves in such a way that they could be respected. And if they did, then that was really a good deal.
Absolutely. Well, we talked a little bit about Vince being on TV and being a promoter, and some people, not to get back to that kind of questions, but some people would say maybe you put yourself on TV too much.
That I did? Me?
Yeah.
Where? In Mid-South?
Yes.
Well, you have to understand that what I did, because I was the one that took myself off of television. and I was always trying to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did is that when I started taking over and doing the color commentary, it was for a purpose. The purpose was that I wanted to explain to the fans at home what the wrestler was actually going through when they were out there, and is something that is totally foreign to them today, because they don't ever talk about what's happening in the ring today. That's almost a taboo. They think, see, you've got to understand that what's out there today is a cartoon that's come to life, whereas it was a different era then. We were saying that it was an athletic endeavor, and so I wanted the fans to emote and understand what the wrestler was feeling, and so who better could describe that than somebody who had wrestled? But my goal was always to get myself out of the ring and to get myself off the television. And so basically speaking, as years went by, I was on TV less and less and less.
Mm-hmm.
When you went to WCW in the early 1990s, some fans say that they were upset with the WCW product because Ric Flair was no longer around, of course.
But I didn't have anything to do with that.
Yeah, you weren't involved with that. I mean, we know that, yes.
Do you believe that WCW without Flair was as big of a deal as a lot of people seem to think it was?
I don't think any one person would make WCW. I don't think that was their problem at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think their problem was that they'd spent like $30,000, which was a lot of money back then. They'd spent $30,000 on a survey to find out what the fans wanted, and versus NWA wrestling or Vince's wrestling, and the survey came back unanimously saying we don't want what Vince has. We want something completely different. And so they took that study that they'd used that $30,000 to do, and ignored it. And instead they started trying to copy Vince. Well, you're not. I don't care what. Vince is a genius in his own right, so you're certainly not going to out-innovate the innovator of his own system. And so they had no rhyme nor reason, and it was just a financial failure. And and they wouldn't listen to anybody. They had a bunch of people up there that it's like anything else. They always think they know what they're doing, and even if they don't know what they're doing, they're going to say they do, just because they'd much rather be in power than to have somebody successful helping them. So that was what would happen at Turner Broadcasting, is that they had just let it go, go crazy, kind of speak, and it had little direction, and it had and it showed. And so they were losing like $8 million a year then. So when they brought me in, they asked me if I could bring it in at under an $8 million a year loss, and I said, "Gosh, I hope so." And as a matter of fact, in 11 months, we brought it in at a $400,000 loss, and couldn't even get an accommodation from the boss upstairs because he was in his politics too. So, I always operated everywhere I ran. I believed you had to have a bottom line. I mean, in other words, why be in business if you don't have a bottom line? That's what you're in business for. Mm-hmm. And so I ran every business I was ever in as a business.
Was it your idea to stop the whole jumping off the top rope thing in WCW, or was that something over your head?
It was my idea. Sure, it was my idea.
Why?
Well, how old are you?
Not really. I'm about 18 now. Yeah, that's right.
You're 18 now? 18. Well, I doubt if you would understand what I would say then, but here was your theory of being a villain. If you were going to be a villain, you had to cheat in order to beat the babyface. If you could walk out into the ring and beat the babyface head on, then you ought to be the babyface. Mm-hmm. So when you're jumping off the top rope, there's no heat to it because you're not breaking any rule. So by making it illegal, then if you jump off the top rope without getting caught and beat the babyface, you have gotten what we call heat. And so it was really a good idea.
Perfect sense.
Totally good.
Perfect sense.
Yeah, and it did. And so we were not trying to get away with people doing high-risk maneuvering moves. My gosh, we're not insane. We were strictly going to put it back in the context that the move had to mean something. Which, if you look at today, my gosh, they powerbomb women through chairs and stuff, and the girl gets up and walks away. Now, see that? You guys have been retrained to that. So it can never go back the other way.
It can never go back?
No, it can't go back. There's no way everybody's been the audience has been retrained into today. I don't think anybody could afford the time that you'd need to retrain the audience, so to speak. But anyway, bottom line is that today nothing means anything. There's not a move out there. You got to realize that even when we changed the world's title to Ron Simmons in Baltimore, which was a very tough market, there were people in the audience crying because we caught them so off balance. They didn't understand. They didn't know what we were going to do. Well, you go to the matches today, you pretty well know who's going to win what. And you certainly know no major title's going to change hands unless it's WrestleMania or something like that. You know, I mean, it's ludicrous. I mean, so why would you go to Madison Square Garden? Because you're not going to see anything happen. And that's a crying shame, because that was the mecca of wrestling. I mean, I think you should always have the mecca of wrestling where there's major title changes and stuff. So one thing about when you went to a Mid-South event, you never knew what was going to happen, but you knew one thing, that you weren't going to figure it, and it was going to be exciting, and you were going to have more than your money's worth.
Well, that's a good theory about everything. And actually, you mentioned Ron Simmons, and let me warn you, I hate to give you these questions. I'm not a negative person. But I sat down last year on the WWE tour bus with Ron Simmons for about 15 minutes, and first of all, let me tell you that he was pretty well schnockered.
Yeah, I've heard, he has substance abuse problems.
Well, he was pretty out there when I was doing the interview, and we were doing a little thing we do at the end of some interviews when I said word associations, and one of the names was Bill Watts. And his response was, racist, and I have nothing nice to say about him.
Well, you know that there's an old, nothing changes really. When you can't carry the load, how many people are honest enough to blame themselves?
Not many.
Not many. And bless his heart, he was put into an awesome position. And Ron Simmons knows that when we did the drug testing, he knows whether or not he passed the drug test. And he knows whether or not he let down everybody. I'm not saying that. That's between him and himself, but he knows. And he knows I wasn't a racist. See, that is such a cheap, nothing happened. It's just, play the race card. I mean, if I was Ron Simmons, that's what I would really want to be known for, playing the race card to blame why I was a flop.
That, unfortunately, is something that I've heard from you, or about you, is that you are a racist. Now, obviously, I don't believe that, but...
Let's look at my record, all right?
Right.
Who created more black wrestling stars that were true stars and not just tokens than any other promoter in the business?
Yourself.
Who had the only black booker in the business?
Yourself.
Who had, even when at WCW, had a black office manager, not because she was black, but because she was the best. So, that doesn't really, again, that's somebody looking for something to try to create a bunch of crap, because it just doesn't hold up. It doesn't fly.
Where do you think it comes from? Where do you think it resonates from?
Ignorance.
Ignorance?
Well, sure, it comes from ignorance. Where does all stuff like that come from? It comes from ignorance. I mean, you can't be intelligent and believe something like that. Ask Ernie Ladd. Go ask Ernie Ladd if I'm a racist.
You're right.
You think he might know?
I think he might have an idea.
I think he might know. Do you think that if Ernie Ladd at 6'9" and 320 thought I was racist, that he would also love me as his brother?
Right.
You see, so I mean, it gets down to the point where people are creating stuff for their own self. Again, what's their payoff?
You mentioned a few minutes ago about it never going back, and one of the other things that I think is damaging the business is how open it is, how everybody knows everything about the personal lives of the wrestlers. What do you think of the, for lack of a better term, death of kayfabe?
Well, to me, I think it didn't do anything good. It's kind of like I told the guy, the bosses at WCW, John Wayne, we know, doesn't kill the Indians.
Right.
But he doesn't ride off in the sunset with them either. And so you're a fan.
Right.
Let me ask you, you see, if there's no mystery, what's the excitement? I mean, let me give you for instance. My wife wanted me to go see Titanic.
Right.
I didn't go. I know what the ending was. The boat was gonna sink. So I mean, I want to be. If I'm going to be entertained, I don't want to have it figured before I get there. You know, whether it's a movie, anything, the movies that catch me that I love, the movies that I love that have great memories that I'd watch again are the movies where they were executed well enough and that the finish, or whatever you want to call it, was a surprise to me.
Just out of curiosity, what is one of those movies?
Oh, I love Shane.
Shane.
Now, Shane to me was one of the classics that really showed you how you ought to build build an issue between a babyface and a heel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there you have Alan Ladd come in, and then they bring in Jack Palance as the big bad guy, and they both go over, and then you have the one big blow off. I'll tell you another great movie, a great western that I love, was One-Eyed Jacks with Marlon Brando.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I mean, there's some great movies out there, but the great the first that Steve McQueen when he was the bank robber. I can't even think of that one right now. The Thomas Crown Affair. Mm. What a great finish! There was another one that was really neat. That was there was a Crooked Man with Kirk Douglas and Henry Fonda, because Henry Fonda, who ever figured he'd be the villain? I'd never seen Henry Fonda as a villain. And the ending on that thing was just phenomenal when Henry Fonda turned out to be the guy with no morals. Mm-hmm. So you see what I mean? Those are the movies like that. Mm-hmm. What do you want to do? You want to go to one where you already know who the bad guy is and who's going to win and who's going to lose, and that it's all nothing in any way? I mean, you don't see a good movie,
right?
Even though you know it's actors,
right?
You can still get caught up in it and enjoy it and really let yourself go. Well, you can do the same thing in a wrestling match, that the guys are great athletes, they're great performers. You can still go there because they can fool you. That's happened too many times. I always tell the story about Killer Kowalski and I getting into it in the dressing room in a little town in Pennsylvania when J.J. Dillon was a commission referee. He wasn't even in the business yet, and we got into it in the ring, and everybody thought we'd gotten into it, and we carried it on down in the dressing room. And we had guys taking sides and trying to separate us and everything else. It was just a scream. And we had guys calling the office to try to snitch off on us because, why? Because they hoped that we'd get fired so they'd get our position, you know? The usual high moral ground type thing. So the bottom line is, Kowalski and I came to the town together and rode home together and had a laugh about it all the way. I'll tell you a funny thing. At one time when I snatched him out of the shower and he and I were about to hook up again, one more time I said, "You big dumb Polak, I'm going to suplex you right here on the concrete." And that wasn't racial then, because that's just how we talked then. And Kowalski was one of my dearest friends. I mean, the guy I got over in New York going 20-minute Broadways with the guy. Okay. That's how over he was. Just for me to be able to go a 20-minute Broadway with him got me over. So anyway, the bottom line is, the Kowalski, and I'm telling him I'm getting ready to suplex him on the concrete, and the guys are saying, "No, Bill, no, don't suplex him on the concrete." And Kowalski's whispering in my ear, "What the hell's a suplex?" He didn't even know what a suplex is. And I mean, it was just a trip. So now here's what the point is. The point is two great workers, and I'm not talking about myself as being a great worker. Let's say two people that know how to get themselves over and how to engineer a match for the emotion they want. Mm-hmm. If they can fool the boys, they can sure fool the people. Mm-hmm. And then don't you think that the only time the boys got upset about that deal probably is when they figured out they'd been had. You know? Right. But the bottom line is, what should you rather go watch? Would you rather go watch Titanic when you know the boat's going down? Right. Or would you rather go watch a movie that you think, my gosh, I wonder how is this going to happen? What are they going to do with this? Mm. That to me is, that's what I'd rather watch. Mm. Well, I read an interview. And that's what I'd rather be a part of. Right. And I read an interview you did before your book came out. You were talking about how initially you didn't even want to write a book. No. What changed your mind? The reason I never wanted to write a book is I didn't want to do exactly what all the books that I understand. I haven't read any of them. I don't follow it, but I understand most of the books out there are self-aggrandizing. In other words, the guy that wrote it, he beat everybody. He was the greatest thing since sliced bread. You know, he could probably walk on water. And for me to sit there and write a book about our business, what's my payoff? What's the return? I don't need to be self-aggrandized. You know, it's just not where I am in my life at this time, that I want to go out and convince everybody how great I am. You know, that's just baloney. So I didn't want to do it. But then when Scott Williams came to me with the project, and I found out Scott Williams is a Christian too, and I told him, I said, Scott, I'm interested in this project, providing I can tell the story the way I want to, but also that I can reveal in this journey in life the things I feel I've learned in my spirituality. Because I think there's a major problem in the human race, is that we're all going to die. I think we're all going to die. I don't think anybody's going to get out of here without dying.
Right.
So if mortality is a major issue, I think it's time we all face it. And generally speaking, let's face it, who wants to talk about mortality, especially their own? But you better start thinking, where are you going to spend eternity? Or do you think this is it, and that you just burn up in a crisp and there's nothing? Or do you think there's a spiritual life and an eternal life? And if you think there is a spiritual life or eternal life, do you think heaven and hell are real? If you think heaven and hell are real, and if you die tonight, where will you go? Where will you go? Will you go to heaven or to hell? And if you go there, and you say, well, I would go to heaven, pray tell me, why would God let you in? And so, see, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to explore some of these things, if just to get people to think that, man, maybe I better think about this. Maybe I better think about where I'll be spending eternity. I just had a friend go to a bank 2 years ago in Tulsa to make a deposit, and they were robbing the bank. They shot the bank manager. They murdered the beautiful young lady who was the teller, shot her and killed her, and they shot him. 2 years ago, they shot him. He was walking in that bank. He was a successful businessman. The only thing he was going to do there was make a deposit, and he ends up getting shot. Do you think maybe he might think, gee whiz, where would I have gone if I'd have been shot? What would have happened to me? So that's what the reason is right now.
Have you always been this religious, or is this something that came along later in life?
Well,
Or spiritual?
I think everybody, too, would like to wrap everything up and put a nice, neat bow on it. Unfortunately, I can't. In my book, I talk about the fact that I was raised in the church and very deeply convicted in that I believed in Jesus Christ. But then I also started talking about how the rebellion set in. And you see, I think that a lot of very well-meaning churches start trying. You see, they make it so anybody, they get you to where anybody can understand how to become saved, so to speak, as the term is used. But then as soon as you're saved, it's almost like, well, now then that you're saved, we're going to tell you all the things you have to do so you can't lose your salvation. And that's when they start in all that, and they got this performance thing all geared up to where if you do this, this, and this, then you don't lose your salvation. But if you do this, this, and this, you lose your salvation and you're kicked off the team. And here's the problem in America, and the problem in our world, is that everybody wants to measure up. We all want to measure up. We all want to be a part of something. We all want to be a part of a family or part of a team. We want to be a winner. We want to be part of this, okay? And so then the hardest thing in the world is, do we make the team? And if somebody says, well, you made the team, but now you're not making the team, you're kicked out. Do you get kicked off the team? And this is a horrible thing to put people into. So here's Almighty God, who invested so much of himself in having a relationship with us. He's the only God of any religion that says, I love you so much that I want a relationship with you. I love you so much that I will send my own son to pay the penalty for your sin, because I want to have an eternal relationship with you. He's the only God that does that. And so, you know, that was huge. So in my rebellion, all these years of rebellion, you know, I turned my back on that, and I went into the desert of all that. But I don't care whether you believe in God or you don't believe in him. God's laws are absolute. See, here's another thing, another big trap. We're into a society of relativism, and we're trying to do away with anything that says there's absolute right and absolute wrong.
Absolutely.
And so what happens then is, if you don't have a model for absolute right and absolute wrong,
right,
then all of a sudden you have no basis for your moral and ethical behavior.
The most recent thing is look at all the child molesters and how many people are trying to get them out.
That's just one other symptom of a sick society. Is you're exactly right. And so again, I'm telling you, there is a place that there is moral. There is a distinct set or model for right and wrong, and that's the Holy Bible. So now, whether or not you believe the Bible or not, if you violate God's law, you will suffer the consequences. Let me give you for instance. Let's say that all of a sudden in America it's no longer against the law to commit murder. It's not against the law. Do you think then that you could commit murder and not have any consequences just because it was not against the law? Because see, it's against God's law. So let's say you believe that in America passed a law, it's not against the law to commit murder. Then do you think that you could commit murder even though it wasn't against the law and not have any consequences?
No.
No, because you would possibly face retaliation by the person or the relative of who you killed. You would also have the moral problem of dealing with it within your own conscience and your own self. You see what I mean? So no matter what, when you violate God's law, you're going to suffer the consequences here on earth. The difference is God has paid your eternal sin debt, so that you're not going to pay for it in eternity, and that's a huge thing. And so, what my whole book is about the choices I made and their consequences. And if I could live my life over again, the one thing I would want to do is never to take a drink. Another thing, because if I didn't, maybe I would have been the kind of father I should have been, because you see, there are no mistakes. A child is a gift of God. God decides life. So if he gives you a child, that's a blessing from him. So then you become a steward for that child. Well, I didn't even love my children as a blessing of God enough to be a man of moral integrity where I stayed married and didn't cheat on their mother every single night in the wrestling business. You see what I mean? And kids look at Dad like, gee, Dad, you can fix things. You're my dad. And Dad didn't fix things. And see, kids aren't going to do what you say. They're going to do what you do. So my kid said, well, Dad, you say don't drink and drive. That's right. My gosh, I got a beer in my hand and I'm doing 100 miles an hour. And then when your kids get out on the road and they get around the other guys, they find out Dad is screwing all the girls around the arena. Well, first of all, what does that do to a young man to think my dad is cheating on my mother? It's got to kill him. But then what does a kid want to be? He wants to be just like Dad. So then he goes and starts cheating around a dysfunctional business, and I never saw a family in wrestling that wasn't a dysfunctional family, including my own. And how subtle the delusion of Satan is, that for some reason I thought I was a pretty good father until I started looking at it in the light of God. And I realized I was a horrible father, and my kids are still paying the price for the things that I did wrong. Another thing in families, every child is unique. God doesn't make any mistakes. He doesn't make a mistake. So no child should be compared to the other. Each child should be loved completely and 100% for who they are. Instead, we are always comparing our children. Well, you've got it. My little brother, good gosh, what he went through. You got to be like Billy, make the same grades, play football, wrestle. What a horrible burden to put on a child instead of him just being loved for who he was. How insecure do you end up if you think you've got to have approval based upon you being or living up to a child or some peer, or to have expectations placed on you by your parents, expectations maybe they couldn't even have lived up to themselves, instead of just love. See, God doesn't make any mistakes. So if a child comes into this world crippled, he has a purpose. He still has a purpose eternally. He's a sovereign Lord. He doesn't do anything that's a mistake.
Absolutely. Well, that was a very enlightening on to who Bill Watts is as a person. I really enjoyed that.
Well, thank you.
All right. Before we wrap up, can we just give you a couple word associations?
I guess you can try.
All right. Now, we're not going to hit you with just negative names. If you have something nice to say, please do. If you have something negative to say, if you want to, you can do it. If not, just say next and we'll go to the next one. Okay?
I got this.
Go for it.
All right. First one I'm going to give you is Gordon Soley.
I loved him. What a wonderful guy. Learned a lot, and Eddie Graham taught me one of the great lessons I learned in wrestling through Gordon Soley. And I don't know how much time you got if you wanted to go into it, but I mean, it was just awesome. But Eddie Graham was a great teacher, and I learned so much from him. But Gordon Solie was a neat guy.
Mm-hmm.
Bruno Sammartino.
Awesome. I have nothing but the highest respect for him. Bruno Sammartino and I liked each other from day one. We haven't seen each other probably 3 times in the last 20 years, and we still have the same amount of respect, because you see, he's a guy of principle and integrity, and he doesn't change. He doesn't change. Bruno Sammartino is a guy that I'm proud to know.
Jim Ross.
Jim Ross, well, you guys right now, you're stacking the deck. Jim Ross is another guy that I think the world of. I hired him at a very young age, so he went through every phase of Bill Watts. He probably knows Bill Watts better than Bill Watts knows Bill Watts, and he can probably tell you the things he likes and the things he don't like. But the one thing is, Jim Ross was dedicated. He loved this business, and he learned every single phase of it. Every phase. He not only was a great announcer, he became a good booker. He was also a great syndicator. Jim Ross could do it all.
Here's one for you. Crippler Ray Stevens.
Oh, I love the guy. I learned a lot from Ray Stevens, too. Ray was at the height of his career when I met him in California, and he was a complete package, and he was just one of these guys that was a natural in the ring. He was a great teacher, too. Many times we got in trouble for me doing something wrong where he would make me do it until I got it right in the ring. And then I was in a match one time with Jim Haiti, who was another great guy. Shires was smart. Most of the promoters were. When you came in, for some reason, I've always had that ability to get over and draw money, but that didn't mean that I could carry a match the proper way sometimes. So what Shires did was he put Jim Haiti with me to be my tag partner, and I was the champion. And then, so he would work me in tag matches and then build up to the championship match. And so lots of times, Haiti, they'd give me a big, huge comeback. I'd come in and make the comeback, and Stevens or Patterson would say, now get back out of here and get Haiti in the ring before you kill us all. Let us get this match back under control. But one time we were in San Jose, California, and they had a match. We had a match. I was in it. I say they because what I watched Haiti and Pat and Ray do blew my mind. I'd never seen moves like that. I mean, they were just off the planet, and the people were just completely exhausted when the match was over. And yet, when we came to the dressing room, Roy Shires cussed us out for 30 minutes about we were killing the business, and he used it as a comparison that he'd had Pepper Gomez out there, who was a great star, and had Pepper in Pepper's match. The finish was built a certain way, but we were out there doing the same things that he'd been carried out of the ring on. We were doing them as high spots. I mean, the thing, Ray Stevens could do bumps that he was ahead of his time. And Jim, so you see, Roy was right. And if you didn't hold the line and make things have meaning and have reason, which is just what you were talking about today, earlier today, is when you can powerbomb a 120-pound girl on a table,
right,
and she gets up and walks off, there's nothing that has any rhyme or reason or meaning. So that's how you learn. See, in the old days, you learned the business going up and down the road and working with so many different people. Because if we drove to Fresno for television, I'm telling you, all the way down and all the way back, Jim Haiti was telling me what I was doing right or wrong, and most of the time it was more wrong than right. And that's how they taught you. And it was a great place to learn an awful lot of things. So Ray Stevens was great.
Actually, I want to throw a little quote that Hulk Hogan gave me, and actually 5 minutes or 5 weeks after Hulk Hogan gave it to me, JBL gave it to me, and that is, a lot of the guys in business today, they learn the moves, but they don't learn wrestling.
Well, and that's true, but it's a different business.
Right.
And so, again, the guys are going to do today what it requires for them to make it today. And that's why you have so many of the old guys that still can hang on, because they can still go out and have a match because they understand the psychology of managing the crowd. And so those guys can go out and even though they're much older and maybe don't have the same amount of stamina and everything or the same athletic ability, they can still go out and have the great match because they can control the crowd.
Just got a couple more for you here. First one is going to be Ric Flair.
I like Rick. I have no problem with Rick. Rick used to carry my bag when I was a star, and he was just getting in, but he worked his way up and became world champion. I always felt Rick gave you his all in the ring. So I never had a problem with Rick that I'm aware of, and as a matter of fact was instrumental in getting him to come back to WCW, because I felt we needed more people there who would always compete to have the best match. You see, when I came back to WCW, I always believed that if somebody was in the match before me, that I wanted to go watch it because I wanted to have a better match than they had. We had to compete for our positions, but when their positions were guaranteed by contract. Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't have to compete, and they didn't want to have to spend the time. They didn't want to have to sit there and watch the other match. Why do I have to do that? Well, how do you get better if you don't see what somebody else is doing? So anyway, at my place, you had to be there a certain amount of time before the matches, and you couldn't leave after your match. You were there to be a part of the business, and it was a part of it. So I wanted Flair to be back there because I knew that Flair, with his ego, would go out there and he would be competing to have the best match on the card. That's what I wanted out of him, and I knew he would do that. So I've always thought Flair was great for our business.
Scott Steiner.
Scott Steiner is without a doubt a great athlete, and I think I don't think it's great as a person. He and I did not get along. Rick Steiner is the one I love, and was a great one, and always was great. And Scott was, so many guys that were so heavily juiced had a lot of emotional problems, and so then and again, you had no control over the way the contracts were set up there. It wasn't based on performance. So if a guy, even if he got injured, he didn't have to go to rehab until we set it up. That's one of the things we did too, set up a rehab where you had to go to rehab. He didn't have to do anything and could collect his whole contract. What's your incentive? You see, athletes can't be allowed to sit in a comfort zone. Mm-hmm. That may be okay for Mr. Corporate America if you want, but it's not for athletes. Athletes have to know that they're always out there competing for their job, that if somebody's always coming in and be better, they're going to be replaced. That's just the nature of it. So I'm not a big Scott Steiner fan, although I certainly recognize his athletic ability. Would always give him the credit for that. But I don't think he could hold a candle to his brother Rick Steiner. I thought Rick Steiner was 10 times better than Scott.
All right, final three. First one is your son Eric Watts.
My son Eric is a neat kid, and he got a lot of bad rap because of the politics. It's kind of like, today with Exxon getting all the rap on the oil deal, and that has nothing to do with it. Isn't it amazing how gullible people are, and that nobody's paying attention? If you really want to save money on gasoline, let's let the government reduce the taxes.
Right, exactly.
I mean, the Exxon's making, less than 10% per gallon, and there's 20% just in government and federal tax, not including the state tax. So
I have a statistic for you on that.
Yeah,
66% of what you're paying for gas is taxes.
Yeah, so the bottom line, but everybody wants to blame Exxon, and Exxon's not the culprit. But anyway, bottom line, my son Eric, a good athlete. He was Snellenberger's quarterback. He wanted to be a part of this. I think that guys that have grown up in the wrestling business generally speaking, make very good wrestlers for our business. So if I had it to do all over, I'd done the same thing. He wasn't put over a bunch of people. So if you go back and look at the record, we didn't put him over any stars. And Rick Rude didn't want to do the program the way we wanted it, and never did understand it. And here's Rick Rude, who was without steroids, in my opinion, would have weighed he would have been a whopping 180-pounder. And so he thought that the way to get heat was to eat up everybody. So it just didn't work. And then the next thing on Eric's part is Eric never got enough time and grade to learn how to get himself over, because Eric, like so many guys like him, would go out and he would make the match first, and that doesn't always make you able to understand how to get yourself over. For instance, Ted DiBiase. Ted DiBiase is the kind of guy you always want in the card, because Ted DiBiase is going to get the match over first. He's going to make sure the match gets over, and everybody's not like that. And so my son Eric, I think, got a certain bad rap, and that's too bad, but that's life. I don't think he deserved the bad rap, personally.
Okay. Vern Vern Gagne?
Vern Gagne was a neat guy. Vern Gagne was he was an All-American wrestler from Minnesota. He's also All-American in football, and he also was on the Olympic team, on the United States Olympic team. So when you're talking about credentials as an athlete, he had them. I thought as a promoter, he really could see the big picture. I didn't think he didn't necessarily like details, which I think was his shortcoming. But as far as understanding what he was going to do and where he was going to go with something, he was extremely good at it, and so I learned a lot from Vern. See, I think you got to learn from everybody that you're around, and I learned a lot from Vern. You see what they do that you agree with, or you see what they do that you disagree with. I think that you have to grow, and so I think that I learned a lot from Vern, and it was good.
All right, last one. This is a very popular one to give people. Vince McMahon.
Senior or junior?
That would be senior, the one we have. Well, junior, the one we have now.
Oh.
By the way, don't call him junior. He gets mad with that.
Well, I could care less. I never was noted for really kissing his ass anyway. But the bottom line is that I think he's a very, very driven guy. I think he's extremely creative. I enjoy booking with him. The guy books through the same theory that I did, that you get way out there ahead, and you book ahead, and then of where you want to be, then you work backwards to see how to get there. So I think Vince was excellent. I think he's, without a doubt, as I told him, there's just no room for two Titans at Titan. But I thought the experience was good. That I got a chance to get to know him, to see what I thought of him personally. And but I was also ready to get out of the business and realized that I wanted to leave the business for good that time. I sure didn't want to live back there. I thought his wife, I had the highest respect for her. And I haven't watched anything that they've done since, so I have no real opinion on it from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been such a great honor having you on the show. Where can people find out more information on Bill Watts?
Well, certainly they can go to my website, which is www.cowboybillwatts.com, and that'd be, I think, the best thing for them to find out or more about my book or something they may want to.
Can they buy the book through that website?
No, I don't have any way of taking a credit card, but if somebody wants it from me where I inscribe it, I have instructions where they can buy it from me by sending me a money order or a bank money order, cashier's check for $25 for each book, and then I will inscribe it and send it priority mail to whatever address they want, and a lot of people are doing that.
That's excellent. Well, we can't thank you enough, and we wish you the best of luck, and thank you for sitting with us. We apologize if we turned you off a little bit at the beginning, but I think it turned out to be good, and we really do appreciate your time.
I'm fine with it. Again, I'm the kind of guy that what you see is what you get, so as we got going there, we were just going the wrong direction to have much more to say, and you adapted extremely well, so you made me feel welcome, and you made me feel that you at least respected me enough to conduct the interview, and as you see, I wasn't dodging anything. I just think that getting into putting people down.
No, we're not a Howard Stern smut show. We don't like to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. I just didn't want to start putting them down, and it was getting in that tone, and then I'm not going to answer to all these guys that don't have their own answers.
Right.
So that's their problem, not mine.
Thank you so much.
Thank
we wish you the best.
Bye.
Take care of yourself.